All right. Welcome to the OFC. Yet again, I'm Joey. That's Coop. The Big Four. The the second Big Four. Um, you'd contact, this week. It was Friday, and you wanted to kind of discuss this. Our as we know, there is the Big Four, but I believe that, and we like the original Big Four, of course, but we kind of really gravitated towards I mean, especially me, the second Big Four, or
Hmm.
what I consider the Big Four. So we're going to start off. I am interested because we talk about music all the time in different bands and stuff. So, what is your second Big Four?
Well, the number one and should be part of the big four that could replace somebody. Testament,
Oh,
without a
interesting.
doubt.
Okay.
As much as I love Anthrax, I think Testament could replace them.
Oh, wow.
But that's hard for me to say because I love Anthrax.
Right. Well, yeah. So do I. My favorite Anthrax, Persistence of Time.
And going from there, I've really became a Death Angel fan.
Really? Huh.
I was I wasn't exposed to them growing up, but I saw them with your favorite band, Overkill, several years ago, and I was like, "That's a freaking cool band there."
Oh, I remember. I think the first song I ever heard from them was Mistress of Pain. For my friend had that. I can't. I want to say the name of the record was the Ultraviolence, but I don't know if that's. I don't
Yeah,
know, but
that was the very first album they put out. Yeah.
Mistress of Pain's a great song.
Okay. So number three, this is tough for me because I like a lot of the lesser known thrash bands. I thought about putting Suicidal in there, but I'm not going to quite do that. I think they'd be in that third tier.
Oh, really? Okay.
They're almost in there. So we got Testament, we got Death Angel, and I'm going to agree with you. And I know I'm going to get hate from my brother. Overkill's in there
That's right. Overkill. Get
because
it back.
Overkill is a badass band. I don't care what my family says.
Oh my, they are a badass band, and yeah, they. I mean, come on, they've been around. The second. I agree with that. The second wave, and they're still slugging it out. And I can't. I could just tell you, I just like all their stuff. I really like their. I would have to say from oh, what's that name of that? I can't even think of it. Under the Influence all the way up till now, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Well,
you're gonna get hate. But I mean, in all actuality, you're right. You are
yeah.
right. They have to. I mean, everybody
Just
says.
because they don't like them doesn't mean it's not true.
That's right.
And my fourth, oh crap, I can tell I'm getting older because I was just thinking about them 5 seconds ago. What is wrong with me? I hate it when that happens. Oh, so I said Testament. I
Yes,
said
Death Angel. And
okay.
you said
For me,
Overkill.
Creator is the last one.
Wow. I
I
had a T-shirt
I
for Endless
didn't
Pain.
know anything about them. I went to a concert and they opened up. Same with Death Angel. I was like, oh, where have these guys been my whole life?
Wow, that's funny. You said Creator. That is interesting. I remember actually my friend had it, and then he gave it to me. It was a Creator. It was Endless Pain
Uh,
T-shirt. That is quite. I am kind of actually. I'm shocked on the Death Angel and the Creator, not the Testament for sure. I'm not surprised about that at all. And I'm in Overkill because Overkill they always get mentioned in there along with Testament always.
yeah.
I will say, um, that my big four, of course, is Overkill. Okay, and just because they're awesome, I could just hear your family. Okay, and then I would have to say Testament. Actually, they got signed, right? I think it was they were signing their deal when the news of Cliff happened. So then Testament, I would say Exodus would have to be in there because they may have been in the big four over I would have to say they may have been in the big four over Megadeth because they had issues with the record. They were on some kind of small record label. Okay, I'm not sure what the name of it was, but it was an issue with the it was an independent label and everything went, nuts. So that probably pushed them along or, because don't forget with Megadeth, Dave had to come, just as a side note, had to come back and start all over again. He had to put a band together and get it going. Okay. So
Uh-huh.
Exodus. So, but as it would have it, Dave, Exodus was in, independent label hell for the longest time. So Megadeth. So I would say Exodus. And then my fourth, I would say would have to be Flotsam and Jetsam. They have a history with Megadeth. Jason Newsted, was I don't
Came from
I
there.
yeah, he came from Flotsam and Jetsam, and they would tour with Megadeth. How those bands were way back in the '80s. So, and with Flotsam and Jetsam's first record, which to this day I haven't listened to, I got into them from um oh, the one with the samurai on the front. I can't even think. Samurai. No place for
No,
disgrace. No place for disgrace on. But the when the storm comes down, that sound of that record, the vocals were so bad. I felt bad for them, but then they
I
came out.
can't. I
Watch
can't
Out.
believe you've never listened to Doomsday Deceiver. That is an awesome album.
I've never. And you know what? When that one came out, apparently, that took that got a lot of attention, especially in the early days of thrash. There were all the youngins didn't, there was no internet. You had to, it was in the metal magazines that were out, and word of mouth and tours. They'll take one, like Megadeth would take out Flotsam and Jetsam, and that's how the stuff happens. So my big four are those four. The second round. um
Yeah, and I don't know how I forgot about them, but I feel like a asshole now because I always say Exodus and that group of bands. I don't know
well
how I didn't think about them, but
because you listen to probably more thrash than I do. And I would have to say that the choices, I thought I would hear Suicidal in there from you because you are a fan of, and I am too. I love Suicidal. The first thing I ever heard from Suicidal was Waking the Dead.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that was the
I done
first thing.
this I
And then
done this
I would
suicidal background to trigger some people waiting for me to say that.
well, I was
I
shocked
fooled
that you
you.
didn't. But yeah, you did. Got me, dickhead. But the thing is, with it's kind of like it's too bad that there is a band I'm into, DRI. I love those guys. And they started off kind of like the hardcore kind of scene, the punk scene. And there is
Yeah.
a difference between than hardcore and punk. To me, it's kind of the same, but there is a difference.
Yeah.
Um, and
It's definitely a big difference if you actually know the music.
yeah, and that's where DRI came from. Was the hard, and then they did a record called Crossover. Then they did they did Crossover, and then they really started to kind of take off. They did Four of a Kind. Then they did Thrash Zone. That's really put them out there. Then they did Full Speed Ahead, and then if you, I mean, it's kind of like Kerry King had said in an interview at one point that, the cream rises to the top. So you have a ton of thrash bands that came out, and that's very true.
Yeah.
Um, and the ones they kind of stuck out, they stuck around. Some of them they didn't really go away, but they didn't, like Love Testament. They all had to get real jobs, just like Exodus. They had to wrap it up. They were on tour. I want to say they were on tour, and they were on Capitol, and then they kind of got, that was it. And Gary Holt collapsed the band. They stopped the band, and I want to say Overkill. They kept going. That was still their only job, and it was tough. I've heard interviews. It was tough. They did a lot of touring overseas, and then they did all the management. Um, in Testament, they had to get real jobs. Exodus, Flotsam and Jetsam at one point. They stopped. They went to Metal Blade, and they did what was the name of that record? I can't even think of the name of it now. It's got Monster on it. Final Step, whatever. And then
Yeah.
after that, they kind of were bouncing around too. At one point, they had a different singer because Eric was getting his pilot's license. He was trying to go, move on, because when that money dries up, and if you didn't quite get to where you wanted to get, and a lot of these guys, families and all, then you got to figure it out. Um,
Yeah. Life doesn't stop.
no, it doesn't. So I want to say Death Angel. I'm not sure what happened to them. It's just in the early 2000s, everybody, the label, Nuclear Blast, really started to sign all these guys on. Um, and I think that's where everybody is now. I think everybody's on Nuclear Blast Records. I
Yeah.
mean, Overkill
Uh,
is. They've been everywhere. You know.
and I don't know if these bands wouldn't have ever came back on their own, but I think there's a lot of music that you don't like that help revive some of the older guys' careers too.
Yeah. I'm not really into Lamb of God, but Bobby always from Overkill always. Matter of fact, the singer can't Blythe, he did a song with Overkill, Skull and Bones.
Uh-huh.
And he always said that was Blitz always said that Lamb of God was one of those that is the new breed that's coming up, just like what's the name of that band, Shadows Fall, which I didn't care for the vocals on that. The guitar work was awesome. The drummer is badass, and he's in Overkill. Now one of the guitar players is from Shadows Fall is in he's in Anthrax.
Yep.
Real quick, what do you think about? See, I didn't even say Sepultura. Sepultura, I got into them in the very late '90s, very late '80s, early '90s. I saw a video for Beneath the Remains, and my friend was into them. And then they came out with Arise in the '90s. But I think
Well,
that
I remember the other day you all were talking about Sepultura, and I didn't really jump in. I was kind of busy,
yeah, we were kind of
but
texting around.
I'm I'm not a big fan of their first few albums. I mean, they're not horrible, but
Right.
I'm I'm kind of with my brother. I think the first album I really liked was Arise.
See, I liked Beneath the Remains. I think they started.
It,
I mean,
it was too much death metal-y to me.
oh really? Okay.
Yeah,
That's fair. I think that's how they kind of started.
yeah, they were
Um,
definitely a lot darker in the early days.
yeah, they did because we all were having that discussion, and you're right. I didn't care for. I did after that. Chaos AD was still good, but I kind of started seeing the direction they were going.
Yeah,
I Roots to me was terrible. I didn't like it, and
yeah,
I lost interest in it. I still, I bought Roar back, but I didn't care for it. I feel that it's not. I'll be honest. I didn't like the singer. I just didn't. If I were to, I would have replaced Max with somebody that Heck, if I were them, I would have went after Chuck Billy, because I think at that time Testament was just kind of done. Remember, we got into that discussion about demonic, and I
Uh-huh.
think Scott didn't care for it because of the sound and stuff. But they weren't touring full time. Testament was not. The only member of that band that stayed in music full time was Eric Peterson, because he did that. You had that death metal project, Dragon Lord or whatever it was called. I was with you
Yeah.
when you bought that. God, that was years ago. But if I were Testament, or I'm sorry, if I were Sepultura, I would have been going after Chuck.
Yeah. And I will defend the post Max Sepultura. I didn't like the first one they did with Derek Green. That's his name, right? Derek Green.
Yeah, Derek Green. I don't even know what the first one
I
was. It
think
Roarback that they did
no,
with.
Roarback was like the third one they did with him. I think
Right.
the first they had Against. Remember that one? It was
Yeah.
it was pretty much Roots done over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jason Newsted was on that, as I believe.
Yeah,
Is that
and
the one he was on?
I'm thinking there was one more after that that was even worse, and then they done Roarback. And actually, I liked Roarback, and then I went away from him forever. But I guess my
Yeah.
point was, if they would have changed their name, I think they would have been bigger than
I
it
agree.
keeping
I
the
agree.
Sepultura name.
I
And
agree.
some of the last albums that the new iteration of Sepultura done are freaking awesome. Like I own all of them.
That drummer, he's not in Sepultura anymore. He left. They were because they're calling it quits. And
Yeah,
that drummer, he's in Slipknot now, and then the Slipknot drummers and Suicidal Tendencies. They got an issue with band members. I don't know what's going on with Slipknot. And I'm not going to get into a big discussion about Slipknot, but I don't think it's just the members that are leaving. And I mean, how they've even Joey. I think they kind of ended it with him. So I'm beginning to see, in my opinion, there's more going on with that band in the internal issues, honestly, because the drummer they, I guess, whatever, but the
are you
drummer
gonna
they have
say?
now, he's a
Are you gonna say
monster.
AKA Corey Taylor?
Yeah. Yes. Um, but that drummer they have now, he's a monster. He is a monster. They can get rid of the trash can beaters and just keep him. That guy he is amazing. Um,
Yeah, I know he is because I was listening to the newer Sepultura, so I know he can friggin'
he's a
rock.
yeah, he's I don't know. I feel like Sepultura, they should have went after Chuck Billy,
That would
because
have been pretty cool.
that would have been and they never wrapped it up. They were another one of those bands during the 90s that continued on. If they
Yeah,
would, you imagine if Chuck Billy would have been singing in Sepultura? I mean, just listen to Demonic, right? Those vocals, that is freaking, he still does those type. It's not a whole record, but he still does those vocals. Dude,
yeah,
that is raw power in that voice. It's no strain, it's not screaming and
and
crap.
coming
It is
from
just
somebody that's
power.
seen Chuck live several times the last few years, he's still got it.
Yeah, he's amazing. And I mean, nothing against, they went with Derek Green for a reason. I don't know. I mean, I think he was in a hardcore band. I mean, he was in a band before Sepultura.
Mhm.
And so, they've still got their fans, let's not forget that they do. But I lost interest. Of course, I lost interest long before Max left. That whole new metal crap that they threw into Roots with the tribal drums, and and then of
Yeah,
course
I
Against was
liked it
even.
when I was in high school because I was young, and I went back last year and tried listening to it, and I was like, how did I ever play that
Right. You know, it's
all the
it's
way
it's
through?
it's a shame, but Testament, I like Demonic. Your brother, what does he know? Didn't care for it. It's good. To me, it was just it wasn't a lot of thrash. There wasn't a lot of, they even had to have, because they had, what's his face drumming. and slow him down. How Gene Hoglan is, and they slowed everything down, and it's a good. I
Yeah.
liked it, but there again, I think a lot of the Testament fans, because that record didn't do them any justice. Then they did
The Gathering.
the Gathering, and you and I used to
That's where
listen
I
to that
got
all
back
the.
into them.
Yeah, you and I always listen. We would listen to that a lot. Then they
Yeah.
did that what was it called? Still Deadly after all these years, and they had everybody back. And then it's been on after that. But I think I mean, I guess it worked out. I guess, I feel like Testament, I think, or not Testament, but I think Sepultura, and there's kind of buzz. Who knows where it's going to go about, those guys doing a show together if it's done right. All the original members.
Yeah.
And I
Like the
think they
last,
should.
they want to looking into doing like the last show of this tour with Max and Igor back and everything.
They should. Because
Yeah.
we everybody needs to remember, just because Max left, don't forget Igor stayed with Sepultura. And then he decided to leave after, right? I think the only original member of that, I mean, that from the very first iteration is Paulo, right? But really, uh, Andreas, he's been with them since Schizophrenia, right? So
Yeah.
I look at him as, he wasn't on Bestial Devastations, like their very first couple. He wasn't on there, but
No.
he was on there when they started to really take off. So I think that, you know, he is an original member of the band. Not his name is Gyro, I guess, or whatever his name is.
The very first guitar player.
Yeah,
And
he's kind of
if,
popped up a
if
little bit here and there now.
yeah, if you like the very first couple Sepultura albums, then go listen to his band Troops of Doom. It's friggin' old Sepultura done over again.
Well, how old is old? Is it like Beneath the? Well, no, it couldn't be Beneath the Remains. He was long gone by Beneath the
No,
Remains.
it's like if you liked Morbid Visions
Oh no,
and
I didn't. I just bought him to have them. I listened to him
no,
once and
I'm
went,
that's what I'm
yuck.
saying. Like if anybody
Oh,
listens to this and they like that album,
phew.
Troops of Doom, because that's pretty much what he came back and done was that era of Sepultura. It sounds just like them.
Oh, yikes! Sorry, not
Better production, obviously,
well,
but
right. So
and
I found your okay, real quick. What would be your third big four?
my third big four.
Yeah, like because I mean, don't forget the waves kept coming.
Oh, so you're saying we've been through 1 through 8, so now we're going 9 through 12?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go back on this one because, like I said, I felt like an asshole. Exodus should have been in that second wave.
No, you can't change it.
Well, you saw how much trouble I was having remembering even Creator.
All right, all right. I'll let it go. Okay, so you're gonna throw Exodus in the second wave, and you're gonna put Exodus and Overkill tour together all the time. Okay, so you're gonna what? You're gonna put
So I'm gonna lead off with Creator for the third because I shouldn't have ever forgot about Exodus. That's my fault. I'm a failure.
you failure. You're a disappointment.
So, yeah, I'm going to start off with Creator. Everybody knows how highly I think of him. I forgot about Exodus because of him.
Way to go,
I'm gonna put Suicidal in this one because I know a lot of people just know like Institutionalized, but they were a thrash band
Yes, they
in the
were.
earlier days.
Yep.
Okay. So I got two more. I want to really think about this because I don't want to screw up again and have to go back on my list. um, I would definitely say I put Flotsam and Jetsam in there because they do belong at least in the top 12.
Yeah.
And I know they're not necessarily a thrash band, but I'm gonna put Death in there.
Ooh, that's quite interesting. I can agree with that.
because they're kind of a mix between thrash and death metal.
They are. As you know, even in the early days, they were not the typical death metal band. They just weren't. And Chuck always says he wasn't everybody. A lot of people, I'd say he was the godfather of death, and he wasn't. I mean, I think he to me he was the best one.
Mm.
I say the Godfather would have to be what was it? Is it Possessed? Because Chuck was really into that band, like Seven Churches.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what he based his stuff on. And it was really cool. I was reading an article with that guy from the Possessed, and he didn't have an issue with Chuck being called the Godfather. Because he was, he got enough praise from Chuck himself. The singer guy was talking. He said, "I got praise all the time." So he wasn't offended that he wasn't, that a lot of people gave Chuck the crown over him. He didn't care. He liked Chuck. There was a lot of, the death metal thing. I didn't get into him. I will say I agree with you because that he would have been actually I didn't even put death in my, second round because death is death metal. I mean, their first record, the first one I ever heard was Scream Bloody Gore. That's just straight up death metal. I think it's better death
Yeah.
metal. It's better with the music and the drumming, and because, you know, Chuck liked thrash and stuff, and he liked Metallica and stuff, and he liked death metal. That's where death to me comes from. Death has always been different from, Cannibal Corpse, and different from Morbid Angel, different
Right.
from death has always been different, but
So those other guys are straight up brutal. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. If you've
it's
heard
death
them, you
metal.
know.
Yeah. Chuck was always evolving music wise, which is where Control Denied came from.
Yeah.
Because he felt his vocals held him back, but people love death. Yeah, I mean he was between a rock and a hard place real quick with death. No, it was what was the name of the record? Sound of Perseverance. That was supposed to be Control Denied's first record, and I knew it before I read about it because he had that written, and he got signed to that record label. But they were going to do Control Denied with him, but they wanted
Mhm.
a death. They wanted death first. And so what Chuck did was he switched. Some of the music is changed, some of it, but that was supposed to be the first because they had a singer. And another side note: the singer for Control Denied has passed away. Isn't that some
Yeah.
craziness? Because there's a whole other Control Denied CD done, and it's tied up with in legal. Can you imagine? There's a whole other Control Denied CD that is tied up, and I like the first.
I'd
Do
love
you
to
have?
hear that.
Yeah, do you have the first one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. So for me to do mine, it's kind of tough because I would say because right around that time, okay. First and foremost, Suicidal Tendencies, and I love that band. Matter of fact, Ridley and I, for the longest time, we were listening to, and you can't get it on Spotify. What was it? What's the name of it? It's called Suicidal for Life. The first few songs are all swear words. You can't get that on Spotify.
Yeah, it's a hard to find album. I had
Yeah,
to order it
yeah,
off eBay.
yeah. You can't. I don't even think you can get it on Amazon. That
No.
record, that's an amazing CD. So I would say Suicidal because they've done a lot of changes. My second would have to be DRI because we were talking about that. DRI, because they started off kind of like Suicidal. They started off as that, but then they turned into thrash, and it's got the most gnarly guitar sound, the most gnarly vocals. I mean, the man's tone deaf. He's admitted it. I don't know what it is about DRI. I just love that band. And of course, you Sepultura. Then it gets, then I'm not for sure after that. I would like to say death, but to me, because I always say I was never into death metal, but Chuck Schuldiner is the reason. One of the reasons I play guitar is because of him. So saying death now would be a cop out because I don't consider them. There, there's a band that they had one record that is Cyclone Temple. is to me is one of the best thrash bands that just they came out at the very end of the thrash boom. Their record, they came out with, it was called "I Hate Therefore I Am."
Mhm.
Came out at the very, I mean, the thrash bands that were going to stick it out were sticking it out. Even some of those bands kind of wrapped, threw in the towel. They came out, they put out "I Hate Therefore I Am." Then the singer left. There were some things going on. They got a different singer, and then they were gone. And there's no gonna be. I've read, sparse articles here and there, very sparse. Hard to find anything. The singer Brian, the original singer, wishes he wouldn't have, he left, wishes he wouldn't have. The guitar player, who was amazing, there'll never be there'll never be, how these bands will get back together now. That's just not going to happen. He enjoyed it while he did it, just the
Mhm.
business and what happened to them. Cyclone, do you have that CD or did you just listen to it?
I just listened to it. It's on Amazon Music, so I pulled it up whenever you told me to check it out.
"I Hate Therefore I Am" is on Amazon. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was
I love
surprised
it.
too.
I like it. It's really good. I mean, that's straight up thrash to me.
Yeah,
Um,
it was good. I mean,
it's
even the
yeah,
wife liked it. We listened to it on the way home from work one day.
yeah, it's good. The whole record's good. It's amazing. It's underrated. It's one of the most underrated bands and CDs ever, and it's because of when it came out.
Yeah.
So, so I'm struggling. I mean, because like I never got into Creator in the early. I didn't like the way they sounded. Creator. I mean, they sound awesome now. I mean, but in
Yeah.
the day
Their
when they
their
first
early
came out.
albums were kind of just like early Sepultura. I don't like them as much. Pleasure
Right.
to Kill is the first album that I really liked from them.
And
And
then
that's
there's
even still their older sound, but
and it's kind of hard to say, you know, Nevermore started from Sanctuary. Jeff Loomis popped into Sanctuary at the very end. The record label wanted grunge. They're from Seattle, and they wanted grunge, and they didn't want to do it. And Dave Mustaine had a lot to do with them getting it together. Did you know that Dave Mustaine had a lot to do with Sanctuary becoming Nevermore?
no.
You didn't know that? Yeah, that's true. I've read articles that about that, and so I don't know because and to be fair, I didn't get into Nevermore way into the very late 90s. And they came out with their very first record way back in the early to mid 90s. So I really can't say them because I didn't get into them until it was pure accident on top of that. Um I mean, I don't know if I have a fourth one. There's you know
Well, I can think of one you introduced me to that could possibly go there.
who's that?
I think Sacred Reich is right. That
Yes, you know what? I never got into Sacred Reich. My friend did. Actually, Nathan Lukeman was a huge Sacred Reich fan. And I mean, his band is Slayer, and he was a big fan because he used to listen to them a lot. So that means I would listen to them. And the vocals to me, and I have no business with bands and vocals, but there's something about his vocals I didn't care for. It wasn't bad. I can listen to it. I'm going to tell you something. The one song, and it was the one that really made them popular. I mean, there's a Law's Rocket. You probably have never heard of Law's Rocket.
I actually have.
They got Halloween. I never got into them that much. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
bands that you don't like Halloween. They
I
kind of
hate
made
Halloween.
a little bit of a comeback. Halloween, I think it was Halloween. I don't know. Um, it's just at that time there is a band, and I thought they only put out a couple of records, and I popped on Spotify and I was looking. It's called Zentrix. There again, Nathan, he was into them, and he had the Ghostbusters. They did a cover of the Ghostbuster sound, and on the front of the cover it had the ghost giving the finger. But they've had albums come out, Zentrix. I didn't even know they were still around. I just thought they, kind of like Cyclone Temple, put out a couple of kick-ass records and then boom, they're gone. Um Laws Rocket, they did a song actually for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a badass song. It actually really is good. Um, it's so funny how I mean, and there was a band called Viking. I went to school with a kid named Bobby Acker, and he liked Viking, and they were just spitting image. They sounded like Metallica. He was a huge Metallica fan. And there was a band called Viking. Forbidden. There's another one, and
Yeah.
they came out with a record a few in what 2010 was pretty good, but it didn't really go anywhere. But I think they're back together again. It's tough with these guys when that's where Paul Bostaff came from.
Yeah. I actually have a couple Forbidden albums.
Yeah. The newest one that came out was really good. And then Dark Angel, which is where Gene Hoglan came from. They did a kick-ass version of Immigrant Song. Um,
Yeah.
who else? See, Dark Angels. So for all these bands, and it's tough because the thrash explosion happened, and then you got to slug it out, and it's tough. The big four, they are the big four, and I mean, even when it comes to touring and money, I mean, Anthrax makes their money. They struggled with the record labels in the '90s, but Slayer and of course Metallica, without saying, and then Megadeth, they just kept going. They kept, I mean, then of course the other tier, the Testament and Overkill, you know, I said Flotsam and Jetsam. The only one out of the second wave that continued with music was Overkill. And it was Bobby always calls it the lean years.
Hmm.
But they still were able to do it. And you learn I think Anthrax wasn't able to be they made more money because they were on they were on Elektra, but they were always searching, after Joey, and then they had John Bush, and they were on Elektra, and then they got cut from Elektra, after Stomp 442, and they were always looking for that record label deal. Whereas Overkill, they became their own managers, right? They produced their own stuff. They got the money from a label, but they dispersed it themselves. They were the managers. I mean, that would just be terrible. That was the not fun stuff. They didn't even do videos. They didn't do a video. They stopped even doing videos. That's how, the money was. The only way they could make money is if they toured. So they did the cycle. They would go and they would put out a record, and then they would go tour. That's why I was always able to find their stuff.
Yeah. They were like,
Always.
you're not going more than 3 years without an Overkill album.
Yeah, they couldn't even afford to do that. They had to, release it, and they were producing and mixing and recording their own stuff. And then they got Dave Linsk, who's been with them. The two guitar players they've got now have been with them the longest stretch, from the late '90s all the way till now. But my favorite era, and I like all the eras, but would have to be the horror. It would have to be Horoscope and WFO and I Hear Black. I still listen to I Hear Black all the time. But those bands like that second wave, it was tough. I mean, Exodus, they didn't even, Testament would get together, do some shows, and then they would go back to their real jobs, except for Eric Peterson. Um, Flotsam and Jetsam even folded up a little bit. After a while, they just couldn't do it anymore. Then they got back and they got it back together.
You know
But
why? Because America's got no taste in music.
I know, well, because
I'm so jealous of Europeans. They get all these awesome concerts all the time.
all the time here we don't get.
I'm looking for tours up there in Europe.
Yeah. I'm so tired of the 2x4 with lipstick. She's everywhere, and I can't stand her. I don't care. I can't do all this. Just popular music is just trash, man. It just really is. I mean, even pop music I don't know if you ever got into like '80s. There's a lot of '80s stuff. You know, but like let's say Phil Collins. I like one of my favorite songs ever is "Take Me Home." Right? He would have never had a career if he had to have an, nowadays, I mean, who knows? I want to say the 90s really started it, but, you have to have an image.
Uh-huh.
A lot of these guys would never have made it. I mean, Mike and the Mechanics, which came from Genesis as well. Yeah, not so much. Um, you know, uh, I don't know. We can talk about, real quick, with the four. There was a whole string of, as we like to call it, cock rock, right? The Motley Crues and the Poisons and Faster Pussycat, and I really like Wasp. I do. I know we've discussed it before, but that band really pushed the limits. Oh, and as a side note, nobody mentioned Guar as one of the big four. Those guys, Aaron, my friend Aaron, he had bought their very, very, very first record. He had it on tape. It was called Hell O. and you listen to it and you're like, yikes. But they were literally traveling the country in a school bus, and putting on gigs. I know somebody who saw them in I want to say it was a basement of a church, but I don't know if it was a church, but it was like a basement of someplace. Saw a Guar show, and it's not made for kids, as we all know. And he was a kid when he saw them. Then they got signed to Metal Blade Records, I think it was, and they put out Scum Dogs of the Universe, and it's been
And
But
what's fascinating about them is they're not stupid people. Like one
no,
or two of them
not.
went to MIT.
Yeah, they were art students, and they weren't. The singer who he's passed away. I want to say I heard it was drugs, which is a shame. He was really close friend. The singer, his stage name was Odorous Urungus. I think his last name was Brocky or something.
Dave Brokey.
Yeah, Dave. He was friends with what's his name? Randy Blythe. He was really close.
I believe that because they're all from Virginia, that Richmond area.
Yeah, they were close in Guar.
I mean, if I want to have a good laugh, I'll listen to some Guar, but I never put them up there in the top tier. I even have a Guar VHS tape right behind me.
Oh, is it was it the tour for Scum Dogs of the Universe? Was it Live from Antarctica? Was that the name of it?
I can't remember.
Was it Phallus in Wonderland? Have you ever seen
that? I want to own Phallus in Wonderland. This one is Rendezvous at Ragnarok that I have.
I've never seen that. I remember there again, I rented it. I was in Seattle and I rented Live from Antarctica just because I heard of Guar. And who hasn't heard Have You Seen Me? That is not a song we will discuss. But who hasn't heard Maggots and all that stuff? Sick of You and the game show song. Well, I rented that. It is the great. My mom was sitting there watching it. She got it. She got the stuff. Like she even listened to Death one time, and she listened to it. She goes, there's a lot of. She goes, there's a lot of classical in that. I said, yes, and she listened to Pantera. There again, neither one of us named them, but they were more of a I want to say that was there was a section of music that it was Pantera came out. You had Prong, you had all in the same time, Prong, and you had White Zombie, but that was no longer thrash anymore. In the early, we all know
that was groove metal.
Yeah, and now Pantera is one of my favorite bands, but it's not thrash either. It's just not. Like my mom, she listened to, this is my biological mom. She called Pantera the Screaming Memes. But she heard the blues. She goes, that sounds like blues, right? Overkill. She heard, she heard the punk, and she also heard kind of like the classical, what thrash was. She got it, I would say. She understood why I listened to it. But because nowadays it's just it's not. I can't get into it because there's no. Like I said, the last band I got into was Nevermore, and I do like Evergrey a little bit, but all the stuff coming out, like I can't get into. I just and I try, I can't get into Avenged Sevenfold. Can't get into Slipknot. I can't get into hell. All that remains. I can't get into. I can't get into it. I can't get into any of it because the vocals I can't get into the music. Everybody is starting to sound the same. I mean, guitars sound the same. I mean, all the bands that we have listed, the 8 bands, and then we go into the 12. Every one of them has a different guitar sound. It's it's a little similar, but it's all different.
Yeah,
Everybody sounds different from the
if
other.
you put on their album, you're not going to mistake them for anybody else.
Right. You're just not. Everybody from Metallica to Megadeth
And
to
you
Anthrax
just brought
to
up a good
Slayer.
point because I was listening to a band that was suggested to me, and I did like it. But then my Amazon Music goes on an auto playlist. I was like, oh, that song's pretty cool. I look at my phone, it's a different band. I thought it was the same band, and it's a
Right.
completely different band.
It's different. They all sound the same. It's kind of what pop music does. Pop music gets pop. They'll like the Britney Spears guy, woman. Everybody wanted to sound like her. So then you get the same producers. Then you get the same stuff. You get the same song. A lot of these people don't write their own stuff. And
Yeah.
that's what happens. That's what's happening now with these bands. They all sound the same because they want the same producer. They want the same. Everybody, that we listen to, they all sounded different, especially when they started to really, you know, early Slayer and Overkill. They're all these guys. They sounded a little bit the same. The Judas Priest and the Black, all of them were listening to the same stuff. But when they started coming into their own, they just sounded different. Kerry King, they put out, Rain and Blood. They didn't sound like anybody else. When Overkill, they'd put out Under the Influence. It was different. That's when the clank, that bass sound that's when he really honed that in and it carried on. Listen to Megadeth too. I like the sound from what's the one that has Holy Wars on it?
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. I love the sound of that. I love that Jackson, that kind of, I don't know, his guitar sound. I love that guitar sound. Listen to Metallica. Listen to Metallica when they started. Well, now they're just, I'm sorry. I'm not even going to go on a spiel, but everybody sounded different. I know. I can't, don't, because even Anthrax, a lot of people, they really had a hardcore, you could hear the hardcore influence, especially in my opinion, especially, their early stuff. And even the one that really put them through was Among the Living. There's a lot of, hardcore, like the power chord, the Scott Ian thing. Just everybody sounded different. Flotsam and Jetsam came out, they sounded different. Suicidal was different. Exodus had a different sound. It's like everybody, it was a genre and they had a lot of the same likes, but they all just were different. But nowadays, like you said, you put it on autoplay and it sounded like the next. Oh, I like this song, but it was a totally different band that sounded just like this one band. I mean, it's sad.
Yeah, because back up until the 2000s, everybody had their own minds.
Yeah, think about like Cathedral. I love Cathedral. I think I think they missed their opportunity. I think they had a chance because they were really being pushed and then they were gone. I think it was an issue with, you know, you got to remember that music is a business, and and you got to get that money. You have to eat, you have to keep going, and they were really being pushed. Cathedral was. Their first record was just straight up sludge, doom, slow stuff. Then they came out with an EP that and it was more of a bluesy, heavy Black Sabbath type thing, but it sounded different, but you could hear the influences. Then they came out with the Forest of Equilibrium. They had this whole thing, and then they were gone. And I think Lee Dorian was actually the original singer to what's the name of that band? They had an album called Greed Killing. Napalm Death. Did you know that? Lee Dorian
Uh-uh.
was the original singer to Napalm Death, but he wanted to do something else. He didn't want to do the death metal thing anymore. So, but yeah, that's it. That's all I got. We could keep going on and on and on. But
Yeah, couple of music lovers.
yeah, I am shocked
Definitely,
that
I
you.
won't. I don't talk as much as you, but
What are you trying to say?
yeah, this show could go on for 2 days.
Yes, yeah, I could keep going, but that was maybe we should pick it up again. I don't know. I think we'll touch base through the week and figure out a couple of
Yeah,
ideas we were already throwing around before we started recording. But the one thing I will say is I never got into the grunge thing or the alternative thing. Sorry. Sorry, I can't. I'm sorry about Kurt Cobain. I really am, but yike, yikes,
there
yuck. I
for
just,
there for a
ugh.
time in my younger days, I did, but another thing I tried going back to and just did not age well for me.
Yeah. I will
Except for
say
Alice in Chains, I do like them.
I do. I kind of do. I like the Dirt album from beginning to end. But
Yeah,
there's things that really bothered me about that CD that they did. But I mean, I like that song. And one of the heaviest songs I ever heard, one of them is that song again. A real
uh-huh.
simple, heavy. God, and I will say Soundgarden. I would listen to them, you know,
Well,
but I'm
Chris
just.
Cornell overall is my favorite singer of all time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
that guy's that guy's he was a master
Have you ever
singing.
heard? Have you ever heard "Louder Than Love"? I think that was their first. Yeah, that was their
Yeah,
first. It's good. It's rock. I
yeah,
mean, it's they. The sad thing is, I think these guys got. To me, alternative grunge was kind of like Sonic Youth and Nirvana and all those guys. I don't think that uh,
no. Alice in
Alice in
Chains and
Chains and
Soundgarden
Soundgarden.
shouldn't have been lumped in with those
No,
guys.
no, they were just a hard. To me, that probably would have been like the next wave of metal, heavy metal, was those two
Yeah,
bands. Not all, and that's why I think people said metal was dead. It never was. I consider those two bands. They would have been the next wave of metal. Then you had Cathedral, because it was all thrash, and then everything slowed back down, which it should. You can't keep going. The same genre because I said it. Kerry King said the cream rises to the top, and then what do you have? You have a bunch of. But I think the music industry is just garbage. I think the next wave of heavy metal was Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Throw in Cathedral. You have what's the name of that band? Crowbar. That was really heavy. I just didn't like the vocals. Sorry. There
yeah.
again, I
I
have no
love
business.
Crowbar.
I have no business talking about vocals with some of my bands, but that was heavy. That guitar sound, that Crowbar, especially their first ones, that was amazing and it was heavy. I just didn't like the vocals. That's just me.
Yeah,
And
that's understandable.
but there again, I think the music industry ruined metal. Not, I mean, it got rid. The hair metal thing was gone, thank God. But then what should have been metal, you had the underground, which was Crowbar and some of those bands. But then you had the bands that I think Alice, Cathedral would have been the next wave, and Lee Dorian. It's your fault because I watched that documentary that you had done. Um, but
Well,
that was the next wave.
we
But
had
then
other bands to bridge the gap in the '90s. I mean, like you said earlier, Pantera came along, White Zombie.
Prong.
Yeah.
Early
So
Prong is my favorite Prong. It was really different. It was heavy, but the drummer that he didn't do the straight double bass, pop, everywhere. It was just a real solid three-piece band. And it was different. And I liked it. It wasn't fast, you know.
yeah,
Um
and their new album's awesome too. I don't know if you
is
ever listened to it all the way
no,
through.
my friend who is he kind of got away from the thrash and stuff. Something the Damager, is that one of the name of the Prong records? He and my friend had it. Power the Damager or something. I don't know. I just want to say Damager was somewhere in the title of this Prong CD, and he really liked it. And he's always liked Prong though. always. But yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But I'm done. I gotta wrap it up. I gotta get. But
All right. Well, the OFC is out.
later.